Trauma. It's a part of the human experience, and it comes in two types. You have physical trauma and you have mental trauma. Now, physical trauma is something like a car accident, like we've seen, or a broken leg from a bad fall. But mental trauma is something like a war veteran coming home with PTSD or a child growing up in a home with domestic violence. Physical trauma is something we're all familiar with, right? You can see it, it's tangible, it's apparent. But mental trauma is quite different. Mental trauma is invisible. And if it's left unaddressed, what happens is it can actually develop into a mental disease or defect. Let me tell you about Ronald Mackey. Ronald Mackey was a decorated war veteran who served in Desert Storm and came home with an honorable discharge. And he brought two things home with him: a very, very strong, passionate love for his family and PTSD. Now, almost as soon as he got home, Ronald realized something was wrong. He started having nightmares and tremors. He became volatile in the home. And he even was admitted to mental health institutions on multiple occasions. But they'd only keep him for a few days, and then they'd release him. He and his wife begged the mental health facilities to keep him longer because they know he needed help. He knew it, but their pleas went unanswered. It got to the point where Ronald and his wife actually agreed that the children should be taken out of the home. They went to stay with his wife's family, and not long after, Ronald had a crisis and a violent outburst, and unfortunately, he killed his wife. As the police arrived, Ronald sat on the front steps of his home, crying, covered in blood and broken. Despite the fact that physical and mental trauma are both serious and significant, we treat them quite differently. For example, the St. Jude's commercial. We've seen it all, right? The children diagnosed with cancer. I kid you not, it really tugs at my heartstrings. I want to write off my entire checkbook, empty my pockets, give my right arm and left leg to help those kids because they need that help. Billions of dollars annually are put into operations, research, and other resources for them. But comparatively, think about it. How many commercials have you seen for children who have been diagnosed with PTSD or ADD or ADHD? You have to consider the fact that there's a difference in the world of how we deal with both sides of the spectrum. Now, looking at this from this dynamic, we have to take into some account as to what is going on and why we look at things in this particular way. It dawns on me and make me think about another story. And I'm going to share this story with you. This is Sam's story. Sam is an actual person as well. Sam, he's a 30-year-old man who was diagnosed with bipolarism and depression. He lost a legal battle where he lost custody of his children. And he was looking for his cell phone. He knew who had it, but he couldn't find it in that moment. And he went to that dark place. In that dark place, Sam took a shotgun, put it to his head, and tried to take his life. Fortunately, Sam survived. The irony, though, is that Sam was criminally charged for criminal possession of the firearm, the same firearm he used to try to take his own life. We have to come to terms with the fact that incarceration is not the solution to our problems. Let me say that again. Incarceration is not the solution to our mental health crisis. For some reason, our empathy does not extend to the mentally ill. Currently, Mayor Eric Adams has a policy that he's introduced to involuntarily commit people who have a mental illness and are in crises. Although I believe that this policy is well-intended and something needs to be done, it doesn't go far enough because it only allows these people to be admitted for 3 to 5 days and then they'll be released with no assurances that once they're released, that they will have some sort of resources of follow-up. It just sets up another process in our system for failure and recidivism. I want everybody in the audience to do me a favor. Look at the person next to you. While looking at them, consider this. The CDC reports that more than 50% of people in the United States, that's more than 1 in 2, at some point in their life will be diagnosed with some sort of mental illness or disorder. So it begs the question, between the two of you, we laugh, but the fact of the matter is that it's really that serious. I have almost 29 years in prison, and for the past 5 or 6 years, I've worked in the mental health program with the mentally ill. I believe that this experience gives me the unique position to say that I have witnessed docs become a de facto mental health institution. I ask that you indulge me for a moment, because I don't think that we really get the gravity of this. Think Batman, Gotham City. Do you realize that all of the villains in Batman were people who had experienced some form of trauma and went on to develop a mental illness? The Joker, after being dropped in a vat of acid, consider that, he went on to become schizophrenic. Two-Face, he was blown up in an explosion. He had personality disorder. Even Catwoman, as sexy and lovely as she is, she dealt with bipolarism and depression. Charles Darwin said, if the misery of our poor be caused not by the laws of nature, but by our institutions, great is our sin. I assert here today that we stand accused, judged, and convicted for failing to treat those who need it most with the humanity and empathy that they deserve. But that isn't it, because we can make a difference. However, it requires all hands on deck. First, we need to educate ourselves. We need to learn what mental illness is, its signs and its symptoms, and what to do when we encounter it, whether it's within ourselves or someone else. Secondly, we need advocacy. We need people who are going to speak out and be a voice for the voiceless to help break the stigma and the stereotypes that we attribute to people with mental illness. And thirdly, we need to enlist and enroll our elected officials to pass laws, and we need to institute policies within ourselves and our institutions that will help provide the resources that they so ardently and justifiably need. Most importantly, we need empathy, a healthy dose of it. And I'm not talking about just from an emotional perspective. I mean something that requires deeper contemplation and action. So going forward, let's be more empathetic, more compassionate, more understanding, and let's not forget about people like Ronald Mackey and Sam, because one day it might just be you. My name is Salahuddin Townsley. Thank you.